What if I told you that the most accurate Thanksgiving film ever made is still built on a story that Hollywood can't quite tell the truth about? Because the real first Thanksgiving wasn't the peaceful cartoon we grew up with, but it also wasn't the violent frontier drama we see on TV. The truth is far stranger, less cinematic, more peaceful, and unimaginably harder. And that's why Saints and Strangers is so fascinating. It gets so much right and so much wrong, yet somehow still reveals a truth we desperately need today. Let's rewind. Here's what you need to understand about Saints and Strangers. It's the closest anyone has ever come to filming the real Mayflower story. The cracked beam that almost snapped the ship in half, it's there. The 66-day nightmare voyage, captured. The first winter that killed half the colony, unflinching. Samoset's shocking English greeting, Squanto's vital role, the fragile alliance with Massasoit, all of it, respected and rendered with unusual care. Even the Mayflower Compact appears with its real content intact. Even the accidental nature of the first feast is preserved. So if they got all of this right, what did they get wrong? And more importantly, why did they get it wrong? Because that's where the pattern emerges. The violence is exaggerated, and that's the tell. There were no ambushes in the first year, no battle scenes, no armed assaults, no Pilgrim Wampanoag War. The film invents raids that never happened. It turns a desperate act into a violent one. When historically the Pilgrims took corn during scouting to stay alive, noted exactly what they had taken, and later offered repayment to the rightful owners. It portrays Squanto as unpredictable and manipulative, when he was complex, yes, but diplomatic and cooperative. It shows the Wampanoag as constantly ready for war, poised to attack, weapons drawn, tensions at breaking point. But that's not what the historical record shows. The Wampanoag were cautious, grieving, politically strategic, but not plotting violence. So why does Hollywood keep adding battles to a story that didn't have them? What is it about peace that terrifies us so much that we'd rather invent a war? Here's the part Hollywood never gets right. The first devastation of this era wasn't violence. That would come later. It was a plague. And this is where Saints and Strangers comes closest to the real story, even if it doesn't stay there long. Years before the Pilgrims arrived, an epidemic ripped through Wampanoag territory, up to 90% dead in some villages. Entire communities gone within a season, a world already shattered before the Mayflower appeared. What the film barely mentions is that these diseases came from Europe, brought by earlier fishing vessels, traders, and explorers, and spread through people with no immunity. The Wampanoag had survived this land for thousands of years. They had weathered wars, winters, and famine. But they had never encountered European diseases, which moved through native communities like an invisible fire. This wasn't a one-time tragedy, it was the beginning of a pattern across the continent. Disease would kill far more Native Americans than any future battle or war. So when the Pilgrims arrived, the Wampanoag didn't fear them specifically. They feared the return of the catastrophe that had followed earlier European ships. It wasn't scientific fear, it was cultural memory, trauma still fresh. And Hollywood struggles with this because you can't stage a plague as a villain. No face, no duel, no final showdown, just people trying to survive a loss they couldn't explain and a world forever changed by it. So the real story is quieter than TV wants it to be, and far more difficult. There were no battlefield standoffs, no nighttime raids, no sudden attacks. Reality was exhausting in a different way. The Pilgrims weren't warriors, they were refugees, parents burying children, families starving in the cold, people praying to survive the night. The Wampanoag weren't plotting war, they were navigating grief. A nation wounded beyond words, trying to understand these newcomers and wondering if they brought death with them again. The real drama wasn't between two cultures, it was between people and the world itself. Storm, winter, hunger, fear, disease, loneliness, grief. The screen adds violence to make the story exciting, but history doesn't need it. The truth is already unbearable. And yet, somehow, impossibly, there was a feast. Not the sanitized version with everyone smiling. Not the violent confrontation the film keeps threatening. Something stranger. Two wounded peoples, both carrying unbearable losses, both with every reason to fear each other, both with every reason to walk away. Choosing not to. That's the miracle Saints and Strangers captures, even through its invented battles and compressed timelines, and one crucial detail it gets completely wrong. The clothing. The film dresses the Pilgrims in black, somber, austere, joyless black. But historically, they wore reds, greens, blues, striped stockings, embroidered fabrics, colorful, expressive, Shakespearean-era fashion. And that tells us something Hollywood doesn't want us to know. These weren't grim, humorless zealots marching toward inevitable conflict. They were people who loved color, who loved beauty, who loved life. Even in their bleakest moments, the Pilgrims weren't the black-clad figures we picture today. That image belongs to the later Puritans, who arrived a decade afterward. The Pilgrims were religious zealots, yes, but they still wore the colorful clothing of their time. The film simplifies this just as it compresses the timeline and streamlines the complexity of who these people really were. But even with those simplifications, it preserves something essential: the fragility of survival, the miracle of diplomacy, the courage of choosing peace, the humanity of people who refused to become the story we wanted to tell about them. And this is why it matters that we touch not only what happened, but who these people really were. Because if we can understand who they really were, not as symbols or stereotypes or figures in black clothing, but as actual human beings who wore color and loved life and chose peace in the most unimaginable circumstances, maybe we can find what they found. Peace is a rare commodity on the historical scale, vanishingly rare. The story of human civilization is mostly a story of conflict, conquest, division, violence. Moments of genuine peace between different peoples, especially in moments of crisis, fear, and loss, are so unusual they almost seem impossible. And yet these two peoples found it against all odds, the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag. In 1621, in conditions that should have made peace impossible, they showed us it can be done. So the question becomes, can we? We still deal with quiet suffering no one sees. We still face diseases that kill in non-cinematic ways. No battles, no heroes, just loss. We're still trying to bridge divides between cultures, languages, worldviews, and politics. We're still searching for meaning and connection in a disconnected world. The world is not what it looks like on TV. It's not scripted. It's not heroic. It's not clean. Most of the time, it's ordinary people enduring storms no one else knows about and trying to find the courage to keep going. Just like the Pilgrims, just like the Wampanoag, just like us. Hollywood couldn't bring itself to show the peace the real people found. It added battles and invented violence. Because even now, we seem to believe conflict makes a better story than cooperation. But the Pilgrims and Wampanoag did find peace. Fragile, brief, hard-won, in a moment when everything around them screamed that peace was impossible. So the question Thanksgiving asks isn't, was the feast perfect? Or, did Hollywood get it right? The real question is, can we endure like they did? Can we choose peace when fear pushes us toward division? Can we build a world where coexistence is stronger than conflict? Can we hold on to peace long enough for another sunrise? Or, like Hollywood, will we keep inventing new violence? On our screens and in our lives. Because we've forgotten how to live without it? They showed us peace is possible. History can't tell us whether we will choose it. It only gives us a moment when peace broke through, at the very edge of the impossible. The rest of the story, that part is still being written.